Hi, welcome to the Structured Query Language course. This course is specially designed for the beginners who have little or no knowledge about the SQL. My name is Ketan. I have completed my post-graduation in Information Technology from IIT Kharagpur and have been working with the product-based company as a developer since last 10 years. As a part of this course, I'm going to cover the basics of the SQL. We are going to do a little bit of setup. So before actually writing the SQL queries, learning the SQL queries, we should understand why we require the SQL and how, where we want to use the SQL to manipulate the data basically. So if you know, the structured query language is popular and standard, that is standardized by ANSI as well as ISO, and which is followed by many DBMS, that is database management systems, such as MS Access, DB2, Oracle, MySQL, etc. So why we require this SQL? So whenever you, as a user or the developer or the application, some application wants to fetch or store the data into the database, the structured query language is the one where you write the queries and your queries get executed by the software that we call it as a DBMS, and the application, ultimately the user gets the output of that query. For example, you must have done some booked some ticket, flight ticket or railway ticket, or you must have an account with the bank. So whenever you open an account with the bank or do transactions with the bank, all the data gets stored into the database. And whenever in your application or internet banking or your booking system, such as flight booking system or railway booking system, when you log in and see the data, what are my all bookings, what are my all transactions done in last 1 month or so, or I want to transfer the money, all the things that you see in the application is fetched from the database. And that's where the structured query language is used to access the data from the database and to manipulate the data. For example, if you update the bank balance, if you withdraw money from your account, then the bank needs to update your bank balances. So that is done via the structured query language. So let's get started with the course. Let's first see what I'm going to cover as a part of this course. First, I'm going to discuss a little bit about the structured query language, what is SQL and why we require it. To actually learn the SQL and all the things that I'm going to tell in this particular course is by actually executing or writing the queries on the real data. So of course, we will first install the DBMS. So whatever is required to execute, to write and execute the SQL queries, we will do the setup. After your system is ready, we will start learning the DB operations, such as create the database, create the tables, insert some data, and do the manipulation of the data. Once we have the data, so basically the fourth chapter is about the CRUD operations, stands for create, read, update, and delete. So these 4 operations are basic operations on any data that you store onto the database. For example, when you want to create, when the bank wants to create a new customer record, then it is called as insert queries. Whenever you want to read something, for example, if you want to get last 10 transactions happen in your account, then the select query helps us to do that. Similarly, we have the update query to update the particular piece of data, or delete query to delete the particular record of the data. And here are all the concepts that are going to cover. For example, where clause to put the condition in the queries. Order by, if you want to sort the result, you know, with some field. If you want in a descending order by date or ascending order by the date, you can do so with the help of order by clause. So similarly, just go through this, topic once, and that's what I'm going to cover in depth in this course. All right. So before we actually jump into writing the SQL queries, do the setup and write the queries. Let me tell you a little bit about the structured query language. So as I said, the SQL is standard by ANSI as well as ISO, and it is followed by many DBMS systems for accessing and manipulating the database. And what database contains? The data, the records. All right. So I'll talk about, you'll understand it more when I actually create the database, create the tables, create insert some data into the those tables. So I can say as a user or some application that wants to fetch or manipulate the, access or manipulate the data, the structured query language is the one which has to be submitted to the database management system. So before even the user or the application is there, first we need the database management system. And this database management system, in short, we call it as a DBMS. It is a software. And this DBMS system is responsible for managing all the data that user or this application going to store on the secondary disk. So the examples of the DBMS systems are MySQL, that is by the Oracle Corporation. Oracle database is also there. MS Access by Microsoft, DB2 by IBM. So there are many database management systems in the market. In this particular course, I'm going to do the setup of MySQL DBMS, and we will execute all the queries with the help of MySQL DBMS. So after this, I'll walk you through how to install, how to download the MySQL, how to install it, and get started with the SQL. So once you install this software DBMS the database management system, the first thing that we need to create is to create a database. Okay, and where this database is stored, of course, on the secondary disk. When you open your bank account anytime via your application on your mobile or internet banking, you always see the transaction details are there for years, isn't it? Even if you can download the transactions, all the transactions that happen in your account of the last year, of the before that, and so on, means the data is stored somewhere permanently, isn't it? Till the bank is managing that. And the place at which this data is stored is the secondary disk. Like your laptop has the 1 terabyte of hard disk or 512 GB of hard disk. Even if you shut down your laptop, the data is there permanently. So of course, the database, your data is going to be stored on secondary disk and not on the primary RAM. And who manages this data that is stored on the secondary disk? By the DBMS. So this is the database representation here, and inside the database we are going to have multiple set of records in the form of tables or relations, we call them as, and this database is going to be managed by the DBMS. So consider there is a database on the secondary disk, and you have the MySQL or some DBMS is in place. Now, as a developer or as a user or as an application can submit an SQL query to this DBMS. So DBMS has the service running. We can call it as a database engine that is infinitely running service that is listening for the requests or the queries. And when you submit the query to the DBMS, it is going to interpret the query. If there is some syntax or error in the query, then it is the job of the DBMS is to give the error back to the user or application. So that's why we have to first learn what is the syntax, what is the proper way of writing the SQL, so that this DBMS understands that language and then it executes this query. It talks to the secondary disk, gets the data, manipulates the data, and as a result, the DBMS gives us the output. Suppose you want to get all the last orders in the e-commerce some e-commerce website you have placed in. So when you go to the orders in your account, it lists the number of orders that you placed in the past. So where that data is coming from, that from the DBMS, eventually from the database, isn't it? So that's the overall understanding. The SQL query is to be written and executed by the DBMS. So if you want to learn more about the DBMS, DBMS itself is a very huge subject, or it's a vast topic. So if you want to really learn that, it is a separate course. But as a part of this course, we are just going to focus on the SQL part of it. All right. All right. So before we do the setup, we start with the setup. Let me briefly tell you about the types of databases we have. There are majorly 4 types of databases. First is the relational database. That is the relational database is the one for which the SQL query is to be given. Okay, so with the help of SQL query, we fetch or access or manipulate the data from the relational database. All right. So and the database management system that manages the relational type of data is called as a relational database management system. So depending on the database type, how the data is stored onto the secondary disk, the DBMS systems are also differs. There are other type of database called as object-oriented database, object relational database, network database, etc. All right. And as a part of this course, since we are learning the SQL is used to manipulate the data of the type relational. All right. I'll talk a bit more about the relational database, what is mean by the relational database, and then we will get started. Okay, so as I said, the SQL is primarily used for accessing or manipulating the data in the relational or tabular format. All right, so now let me just talk about what is the meaning of the relational database. All right. Now here, the relational database means, I'll write here only, the relational database means the collection of tables or relations that we call it, or relations. Now, what is the meaning of this table or the relation? For example, and by the way, throughout this course, I'm going to take one example to understand or write all the queries, so that it will make sense for you as a learner when to write which type of query, when to write the select query, when to write the where clause, which operators to use. So until and unless we take a real life example, it's very difficult to understand the SQL in a better manner. So as we all are aware of the e-commerce websites today, or e-commerce platforms, where you log in, you create your profile, then you search some products, you add a product to cart, you check out, the order gets generated, you place the order by doing the payment, and the delivery is managed by the the company, and the records get updated in the order details are get updated in your account. So as you know, little about the e-commerce platform, I am going to discuss all the queries with the help of this e-commerce platform. Okay, so actually I'm going to create the e-commerce database where I'll show you how to create a table, or how to store the customers information, how to store the order information, how to store the products information and get the list of products, sort it, filter it, etc. All right. So if I talk about the e-commerce platform, what logical entities I can think of? First entity I can think of is the customer database, isn't it? Customer data basically. So I can say the first table or the first relation is customer. What is customer here? The name of the relation. And in the customer, what I can have? I can have the customer ID to uniquely identify a customer, or you can simply say customer mobile number. Nowadays, mobile number itself is taken as the identifier for each customer. Every person has the different mobile number, isn't it? So customer mobile number and customer name, customer DOB, I can say the primary address or the permanent address, you know all the rest of the fields you can just store in the customer table. So customer is one logical entity here. And when I say one logical entity, all the customers will have the similar type of information. For example, every customer will have the mobile number. So I can say 9999, the mobile number, some name ABC, DOB, all right, some address is stored here. So second customer will have some other mobile number, isn't it? XYZ is the name. So this is the actual data. Or we call that data as records also. Sorry. We call those data as records. Or those are called as rows or tuples. All right. So this is one table here. And so this is just a customer information, right? Now, what if I want to store the products information? For that, I will have to define another table. So here is the products table. I can have the product ID to uniquely identify every product in the system. Product title. All right. The description or the specifications, you can call it as, etc. You can store image, you can store technical specifications. So many things about a product. When you see a product details, whatever is fetched from the product table basically. So I can have the product ID as 1, starting with the 1, some title of the product, let's say a TV 123, some description, product 2, mobile 456, some description. All right. So now here I have created two different tables. One is the customer and other is the products. Right. So that's how when you open an e-commerce platform, you as a developer are going to suppose that you're going to develop an e-commerce platform, and the data is stored here. So if you want to show the list of products on your website or the application, you will need to fetch it from the products table and show it. All right. So this is called as the collection of the relations, and the collection of these relations we call it as a relational database. So just to mark it properly, I can say this entire collection is the relational database. And in this relational database, I have the two relations here. This is the relation 1, this is the relation 2. Or I can say the table 1 and the table 2. You can have several tables if you want to. All right. And to access or manipulate the data into this database or these tables, what we are going to need is the structured query language, SQL query we call it. All right. So I hope that clears the little bit about the relational database. Of course, many things are there to learn about the relational database, but let's just stick to the basics and move ahead. Now, let's get started with the setup first. So first of all, as I said, I'm going to explain all the SQL queries with the help of MySQL database management systems. Let me tell you, MySQL is free to use. So you can just go to this link, mysql.com, and go to the downloads. Under the downloads, you can see MySQL community GPL downloads. So let me go to this link. And since I'm using the Windows platform here, MySQL installer for Windows. All right. So here there are two options. Either you can download the web-based installer or you can download the full installer. So I have already downloaded the full installer. Let me show you, and we will start installing the MySQL. All right. So here is the complete installer. Let me just run it. Okay. In the developers default, there are several options here. Developers default, server only, clients only, full or custom. I'm just going to install the minimal things that are required to execute the SQL queries. So I'm going to select the custom here, go to next. So here SQL server. So this you can call it as a database main engine or the heart that is responsible for executing the SQL queries or managing all the data. All right. So I'm going to install MS SQL Server 8.0 27. So let me just add to the right hand side here. All right. And along with that, I'm going to need the GUI based application with the help of which it will be easy for us to write the SQL queries and visualize our data. All right. So I'm going to select the MySQL workbench. So you can select the topmost one and just add it to the right hand side and click the next. Give the default paths as it is. Okay. And just say execute. So if you don't install the MySQL workbench, then you will have to write the SQL queries on the command line utility. That also I will show you in the beginning, and workbench also we will use to fire the queries, write and fire the queries. It will take a little bit of time. It's big software. Okay, so meanwhile, let me tell you that the SQL query language is all, standard, but every DBMS has their additional features in the SQL also. You will see some DBMS uh, have their own set of keywords that are accepted as a part of SQL queries. So you might find some of the things that I have explained with the help of MySQL may not work with the, or may not be specific to the, may be specific to the MySQL. If you want to execute the similar piece of query, for example, there is a clause called as limit while fetching the data. Now there are different ways of using the limit in the SQL query. In the DB2 it might be different. DB2 is by IBM, so, and MySQL is by Oracle. So there might be, I'm saying that there might be some additional keywords that are accepted by the particular DBMS. But don't worry, as of now, our goal is to learn the basic things that is accepted by all the DBMS, that is database management systems. All right. So here is my setup is complete. So let me just click the next. Ready to configure. Click the next. Config type. So here just you have to select the option so that it will optimize how much resources to allocate to the database engine. So this I'm doing for the development purpose. So that's why. And by the way, there are so the second option here is the server computer, means where the some web server is running, which is constantly listening for the requests from the so where your website is hosted basically. When you launch a website, you need to host it somewhere. That is, we can call it as a web server. And there is a dedicated computer. Let me tell you that the database management system or database can be hosted on a dedicated server also, so that your application is somewhere else, your web server can be somewhere else, and your database can be on some other machine. All right. So as we are just learning here the SQL, I'm just going to select the development computer. Keep the rest of the things as it is. Go to the next. I'm just going to select use legacy authentication method. Next, you have to provide the root password to access the DBMS. So I'm going to just provide abc@123. Oops, I think it is not matching some criteria. So let me just give some other password. All right. So once you provide the application, the DBMS root password, root is the username, and I have set the password as my name, Ketan@123. So configure MySQL Windows service. Okay, so after that we have to start the MySQL server whenever your computer starts. So that's why, and you can provide your own name also. I'm just going to keep it as it is and just say next. Let it complete the configuration. All right, so all the things are ready, and I'm just going to say finish. Configuration is completed. Next. And after it, I'm just not going to start it the workbench right away. I'm just going to say finish. All right. So now all the things that is required to execute to start with learning the SQL query is there. So first of all, I'm going to just launch the MySQL 8.0 command line client. So of course we will move to the GUI based. First, it is important to understand the command line. All right. So as I have set the password earlier, let me just give it. So note down your password, whatever you have provided. All right. Now here is the MySQL command prompt. And once you have this MySQL command prompt, you can provide the queries here. The first command that I'm going to execute is to create the database now. You see, I just said that first we need to create a database onto the secondary disk, and inside the database, we will create the tables, the set of tables, and inside a table, for example, customer, we will insert the data, customer 1, customer 2, customer 3, their names, addresses, etc. All right. So the first thing first is we have to create the database. All right. The command to create the database is create database, and the name of the database you have to provide. So as I'm going to take the e-commerce, I'm going to design the e-commerce database. So let us give the name as e-commerce, e-com in short, DB, right? And just hit enter. The query is okay. So how to make sure that the database has been created? So there is another command called as show databases, and this command will list all the DBs that are present in on this system. So I can see the ecom DB, the database has been created. There are other 4 databases, information, MySQL, and all that are created by the MySQL when we install the MySQL. Okay, we will just ignore them and focus on our database. Now to execute further, no, we have several databases here. You can create another database if you want to. So if I just say create database for your company or for the college, so I can say college DB. Okay, and if I again list, there are 2 databases now. One is the college DB and one is the e-commerce DB. All right, so this is the first command to create the database. Now, as of now, the database is empty. And there are several databases. Now, the further queries that we need to execute, we have to set the context first, and then the rest of the queries we can execute on that particular database we have set. The second command I want to tell you is to delete the database. So the command is called as drop, and just provide the name of the database, drop database, and I say college DB. Query is okay. If I again show the databases, that particular database is deleted. Now, as I said, we have to first set the context to execute the further queries on that particular database. We can have the several databases. So the command is called as use, and just provide the name of the database. So the context has been changed to the ecom DB, and now we can execute further queries on the database. So I'll keep our content in front of me so that we will follow that. So introduction and the setup part we have covered, and the create database query or the command we have covered so far. The next command I want to tell you is the alter command. So with the help of this alter command, alter database, you can change the attributes of the database. For example, depending on the DBMS, there are several attributes or the properties of the database you can set. In the MySQL, there is one of the property called as read only. The meaning is read-only property, if I set it as true or false, the 0 or 1, depending on that, you can either modify the database or it will be restricted from. So the command is called as alter database. Provide the name of the database, ecomdb, and you can say modify read-only is equal to 1. Oops, I think there is some. All right. So modify keyword is not needed here. So the command is alter database ecom read only is equal to 1. And once you do that, you cannot do any changes to the database data, not to even any of the tables contained in this database. So I'll again change it to 0 so that we can modify the database. Okay, so that is alter command. So the DBMS system that you're using, you should know the list of parameters or the properties that you can set using the alter command. All right. Now, as we are, this is a command line utility. Uh, so the same thing we can do with the help of the workbench now. That is a GUI based software. So let me just open the GUI based software here. On your system, you can just go to the start menu and search for the workbench and start that program. So MySQL workbench I have started. You see, I have created a database now that is on the secondary disk. Now there are two utilities. First is the command line utility and other is the my workbench. These are just a software that are talking to the same database. Right? The database is only one. So it is just a different tools. So if I go here and on the welcome screen, you will see the local instance MySQL 80. All right. So remember, MySQL 80 was the name of the service that we provided at the time of setup, and the name of the user is root, uh, and the password we have provided earlier. So I'll just open that. Okay. If it asks for the password, you have to provide the password, and then you will see this kind of screen. Okay, so let me just close this query. On the left hand side, you will see the schemas. The meaning of the schemas is nothing but the databases only. And using the command line utility, we created the e-commerce ecom DB. You see that it is listed here. And inside the ecom DB, there are no tables as of now. The list of tables is empty. Right? Make sure that when you will have the multiple databases listed on the left hand side, let me just show you one more time. Create it. Let's create another database again. Where is that? Create database college DB. And let me go back to the workbench. Let me just refresh it. You see, the college DB is also here. So, and inside it, the tables are there. In the e-commerce DB, the tables are there. So we have two databases now. Whatever you do using the workbench or the command line, the ultimately the database is going to be changed, and the utilities are going to reflect the changes done. So from here also you can delete the database. Let me just delete the college DB here. Drop schema, and you can just review the command. Ultimately, this workbench is also going to fire the commands, SQL queries that will be executed by the SQL engine. Now the command is quite simple: drop database college DB. Same command we gave using the command line utility. Let me execute it, and the college DB is deleted. All right. So on the left, on the navigator, you will see the multiple databases. Now, on a particular DB, if you want to execute the further commands, you have to set the default schema. All right. So you can right mouse click on the ecom DB and set it as default schema. All right. So now you can see it as highlighted in the bold, so that you'll come to know what database context you have set for the further actions. All right. So either you can fire all the queries using this command line utility, or simply we can do rest of the things from the workbench also. So I'll prefer to do it from the workbench. It's easy to just copy paste, and the queries, we can reuse the queries, we can store the queries in a proper manner. So what I can do here, to write a new query, you can just say new, go to the file, or a new query tab. All right. Go to the file and the new query tab. Otherwise, just click on this icon, create a new SQL query. So in this window, we will be able to write the query and execute it. All right. So as of now, our database is empty. So if I go back to my command line, I can see show. So if I want to get the list of tables that are present in the DB, the command is show tables. As of now, there are no tables in this ecom DB. All right. So eventually I'm going to create the table first. So let me just go here and let us create the table. So the command to create the table is create table. Create table. You have to provide the name of the table. Now, before I create the table, let's understand what logical entities or tables are needed for designing the e-commerce database, the e-commerce system. So what I'll do, I'll just first list down our tables needed. Okay, so the first table that I need is the customer table. And inside the customer table, what I will need as the attributes, for example, mobile number of the customer. Okay, and by the way, this mobile number will be the unique for every customer. When you log into any system, generally nowadays, mobile number is the one which is taken as the username, and every user has the unique mobile number. All right, so that concept is called as primary key here. So we will mark it the mobile number for of a customer as the primary key. The meaning of the primary key is every customer will have a different mobile number. In other words, no two customers will have the same mobile number. And it is mandatory. You cannot keep it blank. So because it represents the account. So, the account is all identified by the mobile number. You can have some random customer ID or the unique number also generated, but for the e-commerce, it is better to provide the or have the mobile number as the identifier for you. Then we will have the password of the user. And oh, by the way, the second thing you have to think of is the data type. So this is the constraint on the what we call it as a constraint on the column or the property or the attribute of the customer. So customer is the table name. So this is going to be my table name. All right. And these are the attributes. Okay. And every attribute should have the data type. So what data type you can think of the mobile? So there are different data types supported by the DBMS you are going to use. In the MySQL, there are several list of data types. Let me just Google it. Data types in MySQL. Okay, so if you just Google data types in MySQL, you will get this link, the first link itself, which talks about the data types. Now here, mobile number, I can store it as a numeric, all are the numbers, or you can store it as a set of characters also. So you have to choose, you have to think and choose the data type for the attribute. So there are different attributes, numeric data. For example, if you want to store the pin code, you can store it as a numerical. If you want to store the if you want to store the age of the student, you can do it using the age of the employee or the customer. Here you can choose the numeric data type. So in the numeric data type also there are different data types such as integer, float, etc. All right. Then the other type of data is the date, very important data type. If think of the e-commerce database, when you check out the order, when you place the order, we have to say when that order is placed, the date and time, isn't it? Uh, so many data needs the many data in your application will need the date and time as the attribute. So the string data type, if you want to store the address, the name of the customer, so string is the one, the description of the product. So wherever there is a essay you want to write or store the strings, you can choose the string data type. For the there are advanced data types also, special data types to store the coordinates of the coordinates of some place. So there are different data types. So eventually I will come across these data types one by one. Let's start with the simple data type called as varchar. So if I just click on the string data type, you will see the string data type are of different types, and one of the string data type is the varchar. Varchar types. Varchar stands for the variable character, and you have to provide the length of the field it is going to be tech when I store the data. So for example, mobile is a 10 digit, so I require 10 characters to be defined. If you want to store the country code also, you have to add a few more characters. So varchar, I'll just say maximum 15, including the country code as well. So that much of the date, that much of the space, 15 characters, is sufficient to store the mobile number. That's why it's in your hand how many characters you want to allocate for this particular mobile attribute. Password, I can say varchar again, let's say 50, right? This cannot be the primary key. See, the primary key has to be at least one of these attributes or the combination of the attributes. As of now, I will not talk about the combination of the attributes. As of now, I just tell you that here mobile is the primary key only. You know, two customers can have the same password. That can happen, but two customers cannot have the different cannot have the same mobile number. That's why the primary key is only the mobile here. And for the security, you want to encrypt it and then store it as a varchar. That is the application part. As of now, let's just think I want to store the password in a plain text. Other is the date of birth. Okay, and it is a date. That's why the type I'm going to data type I'm going to give as the date only. Other is the I can think of the gender, varchar. I want to store the male, female, or the other. So 10 characters are sufficient to store this string. Okay, address. Address is again varchar. I'll just give the 500 characters is the limit to store the address. And we will keep on adding rest of the rest of the fields as and when we will move to the other queries. Okay, so as of now, let's keep these 5 attributes initially. And one thing I want to tell you that when you create an account with when I want the customer to create an account with my e-commerce platform, initially a mobile number or password are mandatory, and of course the first name I can take first name as varchar 50 and last name again varchar 50. Okay, initially I can ask the user, I can keep the last name field as optional. Okay, so if there is something optional in your application and uh, the value you are going to store it as a blank, then you can say it as default null. Okay, so if the customer do not, if the user of the application do not provide the data, the field is optional, then I can instruct the database that whenever we will create the data, and if I don't provide, you default set it to null. Okay, so I can make first name as mandatory and the last name as not mandatory. I can set it as default null. If you want to make it mandatory, then you have to say it as not null. All right. By default, when you say the primary key is mobile, it becomes not null only. Uh, I just can skip at the time of account creation. The date of birth can be default as null. All right. Gender, I can also keep it as not null. Initially, address can be kept as null, default null. All right. So that's how my simple customer table is. Now, once you understand this customer table, now with the help of this, I'm going to uh, create the table. Now, let me go back to the workbench and let's create the table now. For reference, I'll just copy this thing so that we will not switch frequently between windows. Okay, this is just the comment. Okay, so the command is SQL query to create the table is create table. The name of the table, all right, and the list of attributes you have to provide inside this bracket. So the first is mobile. Then you have to provide the data type varchar 15, and I want to make it as primary key. So just say it is a primary key. There are two ways of setting the primary key. I'll explain it later. If you want to change the primary key or add the new attributes later, delete some attribute later, we can do so using different command. This is the fresh table we are going to create. Password varchar 50. All right. I can say default null. Next is first name varchar 50. Not null. Not null means at the time of insertion of data, I have to compulsorily give the first name. All right. Whereas I can set the password as null initially. Last name varchar 50. Default null. Okay. So the next is the date of birth. So in short, I'll just say DOB date. All right. Default null. Initially, user might not provide the DOB. I don't want to make it mandatory. Gender, however, I want to make it mandatory. Gender varchar 10. not null, and address varchar. Let me take 500 default null. Remember, null means blank value, no value. Right? So that's our. Oops, there is okay. The last comma is not required. So that is our first query, that is create table. So let me just execute this query. You see, below you will see create table customer. This query has been executed successfully. All right. Now, if I just refresh this, you will see under the table, there is a customer table created, and under customer, we have the columns. These are the columns that we defined, mobile, password, and all. All right. All right. So let me just go back to the utility and show you one more time. Show tables. Now we have one table inside this database, e-commerce database. All right. And same thing I can do using the workbench as well as the command line utility. So here, the this is the table I have created. Now this command is to create a table. Now what if I want to delete this table? Okay, so the command is quite simple. The command is called as drop table customer. I'll recreate it, don't worry. Query is okay. So if I again do the show tables, the set is empty. All right, let me just refresh it here. You see the table is gone. Okay, so I'll again execute this query and let us create the table. By the way, this is just a comment. Comment is not executed. This is just for our reference. This is the query here. All right. So if I again go back, the table is there. I'll just save this query somewhere. So let me just create a new folder here in the E drive. Queries, create table. All right. So you can just store it for your future reference so that you can see what queries you have executed in the past.